The book of Hosea is an important prophetic book in the Old Testament of the Bible. It is the first of the 12 minor prophets, a collection of books written by minor prophets who were often underappreciated or overlooked for their messages. The book of Hosea contains messages of judgment, correction, and hope for the people of Israel during a time of great spiritual and moral decline. The book is named after its author, Hosea, who lived in the 8th century BCE and prophesied during the reign of multiple kings in Israel. Hosea's message is directed primarily to the northern kingdom of Israel, although it has significance for all of God's people. The prophet began his ministry during a time of relative peace and prosperity for Israel, but the nation quickly turned away from God and fell into a state of moral decay and idolatry. The first 3 chapters of Hosea tell the story of Hosea's marriage to a woman named Gomer, who is unfaithful to him multiple times. This marriage is symbolic of the relationship between God and Israel. Just as Gomer is unfaithful to her husband, Israel has been unfaithful to God by turning to other gods and pursuing their own selfish desires. Hosea's marriage and his interactions with Gomer illustrate God's deep love for his people and his continuing pursuit of them, even in the midst of their unfaithfulness. The rest of the book is filled with messages from God about the consequences of Israel's sin and rebellion against him. Hosea uses strong and vivid language to describe the spiritual unfaithfulness and moral decay of the people of Israel. He describes their sins as harlotry and compares them to a prostitute who sells herself for pleasure and material gain. Hosea also uses the metaphor of a plant to depict how God had nurtured and cared for Israel, but they had turned away and become withered and barren. Despite the judgment that Israel deserved for their sins, Hosea also shares messages of hope and restoration. He prophesies that after a time of punishment and exile, God will gather his people and restore them. He promises a future time of peace and prosperity and a renewed relationship between God and his people. This message of hope and redemption is seen in the famous verse, "I will heal their backsliding. I will love them freely, for my anger has turned away from him." Hosea 14:4. Another significant message in the book of Hosea is the concept of justice and righteousness. The prophet criticizes Israel for their lack of justice and reminds them of their responsibility to care for the poor and oppressed in society. This message still holds relevance for us today, as we are called to follow God's example of seeking justice and showing mercy to those in need. Hosea also challenges the religious leaders of his time, who had failed to lead the people in righteousness and were instead leading them into further idolatry and immorality. He proclaims that God desires mercy and knowledge of him rather than sacrifices and offerings. This message is a reminder that true worship and service to God is not just through outward rituals, but through a genuine heart and relationship with him. The book of Hosea ends with a powerful and hopeful conclusion, as the prophet affirms God's love and faithfulness to his people. While Israel's sins may have warranted punishment, God's love is unchanging, and his promises endure forever. Hosea urges the people to return to God, who longs to heal and restore them. In addition to its spiritual significance, the book of Hosea also has historical significance. It provides insight into the political and social climate of Israel during the 8th century BCE, including the rise and fall of kings and the impact of foreign powers on the nation. It also sheds light on the role of prophets in ancient Israel and the challenges they faced in delivering messages from God to an often rebellious and resistant people. In conclusion, the book of Hosea is a powerful and poignant work, full of messages of judgment, correction, hope, and love. Through the story of Hosea and Gomer, God reveals his unending love for his people, even in the face of their unfaithfulness. The book also serves as a reminder of the importance of justice, righteousness, and true worship in our relationship with God. Its timeless messages continue to speak to us today, reminding us of our need for repentance and our hope in a faithful and loving God.